Ghost with Cats, Chapter 8, Families. As they walked through the outskirts of town, Annie sent text messages back and forth with her guardian. He agreed with her evasion tactic, but offered his home as a second refuge if needed. Suddenly, she stopped in front of a house, looking at a vehicle. "Tall, there's a park at the end of the street. I need y'all to wait there for me." "My lady, I do not feel comfortable leaving you alone." Tall tried to refuse. "I know, but it'll be easier to do business without three giant men standing outside," she explained. "It's just a mile. I'll be there soon." Tall glanced at Vaughan, who nodded. Then they walked down the street. Once they were a block beyond her, Annie knocked on the door of the old row house. The lady who answered spoke little English, so Annie talked to her about the Jeep in Spanish. She checked the engine, listened to it running. The tires were almost bald, and there were many rusted places on the body, but it ran decently for the mileage, and Annie was glad to talk her into accepting the cash she had in her brace. Thanking the woman at the house profusely, Annie drove away in the Jeep. She pulled into the park, surprised that Tall, Vaughan, and Brice were already at the corner, waiting for her. As they walked to the park, Tall commented on the poor condition of the homes. "How can they live in buildings that look on the verge of collapse?" "Perhaps they do not have the means to repair them," Vaughan suggested. "Or perhaps their terror lives in the oldest homes for a reason." Tall scanned the park as they entered, selecting a bench surrounded by trees on three sides. "We will wait there. What is Lady Annie doing?" Vaughan's eyes glowed slightly as he looked back up the street. "It appears she is negotiating with a female in the house, and checking the motor in the vehicle before purchasing it. Lady Annie seems very knowledgeable about mechanical things." Nodding to Brice, Tall ordered, "Check the perimeter." The large sword pet bowed and jogged the edge of the park several times as they waited in silence, watching an elderly woman who came to the park and called some of the children away. Tall remembered his grandmother's kindness faintly. It seemed like a daydream. Tall barely knew his mother, who only agreed to be joined to his father Tranif because his cousin was King Solomu. Bureaucrat Van Tariff was fifth tier, a farm owner who supplied a tenth of the Eden amaranth for the Eloh. Every year after his birth, fourth-born Tall gained another brother, but never a sister, until his mother killed his father in a fit of rage. The brothers were forced to purchase back her half of the land holdings. Then she went on to two other mates, who also gave her only sons. His half-brothers were all 10th tier or lower. He only met one of his half-brothers when he encountered his mother quite by accident at the age of 22. He hadn't even recognized Tall until True introduced him. She was certainly surprised about him being made a third-tier admit, boasting about his rank afterwards to further her prestige, but she had never once shown him the slightest affection or acknowledgment, except after learning of his ranking. She never visited his younger brothers after she killed their father. He did not even know if she knew of True's death over 6 years earlier. She was as far from the definition of mother as she could be, nothing like the mothers he'd seen on Earth. Finally, Vaughan announced, "Master, Lady Annie is coming." Tall sent a thought to Brice as they walked to the street. The large sword pet lumbered up to them, with furtive glances back at the children on the playground equipment. "Speak, pet," Paul demanded. "Forgive Pet Breach for asking, master. Why are the children unattended? Do they not have families?" Pet Breeze wondered. He had never seen a child without 3 or 4 attending pets and an Eloh relative. Shaking his head, Bourne answered, "We do not know, Sword Pet, but those children being here being here alone is not an unusual occurrence. They feel happy to be here and were only slightly concerned by our presence. Now that we are leaving, they worry not." Getting in the vehicle, they drove away and headed to a store with the same name as the one she and Matt went into in St. George. It was so strange to the Eloh, all the families, especially women with children, coming and going. It was like the marketplace of Eshadel, the one city, which surrounded the equator of Eloh like a belt. The Eloh wondered why the humans chose to have their populations separated into sectors with great tracts of wilderness between. Annie came out with a large cart filled with food items, more clothes, and strange chain and cable circles to go on the tires. "We need these to increase the traction. I would rather get new tires, but there is a 2-hour wait, and I do not want to be here that long," she explained to Vaughan as he helped her put the items in the vehicle. "Because of the camera surveillance?" "Yes, and inside it's worse." "Are you all hungry? It's going to take a few hours to get where we're going." They stopped at a Culver's restaurant, and Annie ordered a large amount of food from the pictured sign. It was many items the Eloh had chosen from the buffet in Las Vegas. Tall noticed the plastic card she gave the clerk, and the ID she gave with it did not have her name on it. As Vaughan handed out the food, Tall asked, "Your name is Annalise, but the payment card says Leslie. Why?" Annie smiled as they drove south on a wide divided road. "Banking transactions can be easily tracked. Leslie is an alias, a false name. I keep accounts in a few different names, just in case I need to be invisible, like now. If I used a card with my real name, those looking for us would come here, but no one is looking for Leslie Green." Tall nodded. "Navigating your world is very difficult when one does not wish to be noticed." Annie shrugged. "It can be, but we have made it across 2 states undetected, and now all we have to do is wait for your retrieval ship. My great-grandfather's cabin is completely isolated and has no traceable ties to my real name. We will be safe there." Tall nodded as he chewed a double cheeseburger. It tasted good, but all the food here had a preserved flavor that he could not get used to. "What will you do when we leave?" "I'll do what I do best. Be invisible. Don't worry about me." She smiled as she took a bite of her fish sandwich. Tall hoped she was correct. He did not wish for harm to befall her. A few hours later, they were at the base of a very tall mountains. Annie showed them how to put tire chains on the worn tires of the Jeep before they started up the mountain road. Twice they got stuck in the snow after turning off the main road. Breeze easily pushed them out. By late afternoon, they arrived at a small log cabin with a sharp-peaked roof and windows to the top floor. The view was majestic. Annie revealed, "This area is called Kuchara. It was once a vacation ski area. but few people live here now." She looked around. Annie seemed both happy and sad to be here. She assured Tall and Vorn, "We'll be able to hide here until you are picked up by y'all's people. Let's go inside." Inside, there was a fire burning, and the cabin was warm and welcome. Annie smiled as they entered the primitive-looking house. There were many modern conveniences. "I asked my neighbor to stop in and start the fire, turn on the water, and flip the breakers this morning. They take care of the cabin when I'm not here. It rents out in the summer to tourists. They weren't expecting me for a few days, but it wasn't a problem. Jorge checked my rover already. I'll call him tomorrow and see if he can pick up the Jeep and get it fixed, and new tires, so we'll have a second vehicle if we need it." Hardly listening, the Eloh all turned in circles, taking in the majestic scenery. "How did your family come to dwell in such a remote place?" Vorn asked. He was always so curious, and Andy wondered if he wasn't as much scholar as seneschal. She told them a story. "My great-grandfather owned and drove mule freight wagon trains from a place called Kansas across the eastern plains to the town below called Trinidad. He built the original cabin on this site as a hunting and fishing retreat, and would haul barrels of live trout back east to the dry prairie twice a year." She laughed. "He would rather spend time looking at the back end of a dozen pairs of mules than listen to his wife yelling at their 11 rambunctious children. The family has a story about 1 month when he suffered from an ailment called a hernia. While he convalesced, my great-grandmother made twice as many haul trips. Great-grandfather hired a maid and a nanny to help him after only a week at home alone with his children. Servants they kept after the children left home until her death." "She sounds like a formidable woman," Bull observed. "Mom always said a mother's work is harder than any career or project she worked on," Annie revealed, as she and Vorn put the groceries away. Upstairs there were 3 bedrooms, 2 of the bedrooms with 2 beds, and the last was a tiny loft with 1 bed. Tall laid their backpacks down on the beds Annie assigned them. He carried Annie's up to the loft. That was when Tall noticed the glass figure of a feline on the dresser. There were feline decorations in every room of the home. There was also a lifelike one sitting on the balcony rail just outside. It blinked at him, and he realized it was a living feline, like Gregory, but colored very differently. On Eloh, living felines never came close to the people, but on Earth, humans and felines lived together. He wondered if it was hers or a wild feline. Everywhere Annie went, there were cats, like the one she wore around her neck. "Okay, which of y'all is bleeding?" Annie drawled in a grumpy voice from downstairs. "Bleeding?" Tall looked down at her, surprised. She must be angry because her accent was back and very thick. It seemed to make her words longer in the middle and softer at the end. "Yeah, bleeding. There are drops of blood on the floor." Vorn was carrying in more bags. He shook his head. Breeze was holding an armful of firewood. He looked down. She began using those words the translator implants did not know. "Breeze, put that down and come here." She made Breeze set the wood down and follow her into the bathroom. "Take off your sweatshirt, Breeze," she ordered firmly. He obeyed meekly. She almost vomited, but she forced herself to look at the wound. The bullet had passed through his side, under the skin, and was still lodged there. She was amazed that it had started healing already, but near the jagged metal, the wound was bleeding and raw. Vorn and Tall watched curiously to see how she would handle the situation. She was a very emotional person, but she was surprisingly calm as she worked. Carefully, she numbed the wound and cleaned it by removing the metal fragments. Then she stitched it. She said, "I'm sorry," every time Breeze inhaled sharply, and she looked like she might get sick or faint at any moment. But she seemed angrier about her struggle than Breeze's wound until she spoke. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded. Breeze looked down. Annie grabbed his face and made him look at her. "Breeze, why did you not tell me you were wounded at the bus station? Explain yourself." "Pet Breeze is sorry, Lady Annie. The bullet that injured Technician Matt was meant for Pet Breeze. If Technician Matt died, it is Pet Breeze's failure to be alive," the large bodyguard said, looking sideways at the blood-stained gauze in the sink. His voice was very, very deep. Annie hadn't realized how deep until that moment, because it was the most he had spoken to her at once. "Look at me, Breeze, in the eyes. It is not your failure to be alive. You did not hurt Matt. Those who pulled the trigger did, and it is my fault they followed us there," Annie declared softly, patting the sides of his face. A tear leaked out of his almost black eyes. She noticed the dark pupils were slit vertically like a cat's. "I know he was your friend, but it is wrong to blame yourself. You must turn your pain into strength and your sorrow into determination. Those who might have killed Matt also seek to kill Admant Tall and Cypher Vorn. We must not let that happen. Will you help me stop it? Help me keep them safe?" she asked. He looked up at her as if she were his new best friend, his slate-gray eyes shining as he answered, "Yes, my lady. Breeze will help you protect the Master and Cypher Vorn." "Okay, you and I shall protect him and Vorn until we can get you all home," she promised as she hugged his large head. "He really is a tank," she thought absently. He kept sighing heavily as he grieved his friend. She stroked the side of his smooth head as he leaned against her. "Breeze has never lost a friend," he said softly. "Breeze has never had one to lose." "I've lost many. I've also lost my mother and father," she revealed sadly. "Pain doesn't go away. It just becomes something to make you stronger or weaker, depending on what you choose." "What do you choose, Breeze?" She swallowed, trying to be strong for him, knowing her pain made her weaker. Breeze did not have a mother or a father, but Breeze chooses to honor Matt, who made Breeze laugh with puns and gave Breeze chocolate, he answered. "Very well. Tomorrow, when you've had a day to recover, I'll show you the egress points and how to shoot our weapons, and we will honor Matt by being stronger." "I'm sorry you did not grow up with a mother or father. Did you have brothers or sisters?" she wondered aloud. "Breeze is alone, Lady Annie. Breeze is made," he rumbled. She gasped as she realized what he meant. "Oh, Breeze, I promise I'll be your family always. You'll never be alone again." She felt so bad for him that he had no one. As she studied his features, they were broader, not like Tall and Vorn's features. They were thicker, and now she understood why. Breeze was a clone.